I think I need to open up for questions for the audience. So let's do a couple of round of questions. Let's pick 3 questions to begin with. So we have, Pablo, you have a mic here. So let's begin with Pablo, and then we have Rafael there, and another one. Questions? Okay, done.
I'm Pablo Hortelado. I'm a professor at the University of São Paulo.
Thanks.
So thank you for your presentation. In your presentation, you mentioned that you acknowledge the problems that happened with Facebook during the 2016 elections in the US. And as you know, our problem in our 2018 elections has not much to do with Facebook, with another Facebook-owned platform, which is WhatsApp, which I don't see there in the, I don't know why, it's not there, but it's Facebook-owned. And one of the problems with the use of WhatsApp for electoral purposes is that
it's hidden from you.
It's hidden.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
We're not denying its existence, I promise you. We're very proud of it, actually.
So one of the problem in the use of WhatsApp is that because it was originally a private messaging app that incorporated during its development broadcast uses, it was used for very malicious, was politically used in a malicious way to wave disinformation campaign during the elections. And the problem is that if this is going on in WhatsApp, you don't know what's going on because it's a private messaging app. You don't know who's promoting that campaign, and you cannot respond to it. So my question has not much to do with a regulation, but with the development of Facebook, because Mark Zuckerberg announced that WhatsApp is the future of Facebook.
Right.
And we're really concerned in Brazil that the problems that we see in WhatsApp is brought to Facebook. My main concern is that Facebook, loses some of its publicity that we have, for example, a news feed that is not public, because this is precisely what allowed WhatsApp to be used in a malicious way. So people are just using, you don't know that this is going on, you don't know who's promoting, and you cannot respond.
Yeah. So I mean, look, the first point of reassurance I can give you is I don't think the analogy you draw is a legitimate fear. Sorry, it's a legitimate fear, but I don't think it stands up to scrutiny, because Instagram and Facebook are just qualitatively different to WhatsApp. They're just totally different beasts. Instagram and Facebook are public, or I mean, you can set it on private settings, but most people use them for sort of public or semi-public forms of communication. And that's not going to change.
But Mark Zuckerberg said WhatsApp is the future.
What
does he mean?
Can I explain? Okay. And that's not going to change. So that's what I was just going to explain. That is not going to change. They will remain what they are, which is sharing semi-public fora. A bit in the way he's described it, a bit like talking on the sort of town square. You're talking sort of semi-publicly. You choose your friends and da. That's not going to change. What he was referring to is something quite different, which is that if you look at the behavior of our users, and by the way, not just our products, if you look at the use of iMessage, Signal, Telegram, Messenger, as well as WhatsApp, I mean, millions, billions of people are voting with their fingers and their eyes to yes, of course, they continue to use the social media platforms on the town square, but they're also increasingly, and in increasing numbers, choosing to use private and more often than not end-to-end encrypted messaging systems. We didn't invent that. I mean, iMessage was encrypted before WhatsApp was, and in many markets is much bigger than what I know. WhatsApp is dominant here in Brazil, but that's not the case in other places. And so what Mark Zuckerberg was saying was, since users clearly really enjoy having the option of having a more private, intimate form of communication, and look, over 90% of WhatsApp messages still to this day are one-to-one. Over 90% of them are. And I know there's been some surveys done here in Brazil, not by Facebook, by independent organizations, which suggest that the vast majority of Brazilian WhatsApp users are members of no more than, or are only part of 4 or 5 groups, and that those are overwhelmingly family and friends, small groups. Um, so, but because of that trend, what Mark Zuckerberg has said is he's going to, what he wants us to do, which we're now working on as a company, is to make the messaging systems that we have, WhatsApp and Messenger, interoperable. So that means that if you're on Messenger, you can send me a message from Messenger, I receive it in WhatsApp, I can send it from WhatsApp, and you receive it in Messenger. And that Messenger becomes end-to-end encrypted in a way very similar to WhatsApp. And then on top of that, you can then build really useful things like payments. So we hope soon to start introducing in Mexico and then elsewhere the ability for people to make payments on WhatsApp. We're also hoping to start doing that in India. So that's what he was talking about. But that's not to the detriment of Facebook and Instagram. That they will remain, in a sense, that in the same way that people talk differently in the town square as they do in the intimacy of their living room, those two things will stay the same. So I think I can give you reassurance on that. I think the bit which is candidly something we're working very, very hard on is how do we stop WhatsApp being used and abused as a sort of tool for mass message transmission by political campaigns, because that's just simply not what it's designed for. As I explained earlier, we totally accept that politicians want to reach voters through ads and through organic content on Facebook, and we try and set rules. But WhatsApp is not. It's not what we want. It's really not what we want. Now we have become better and better, not least, by the way, through the analysis of our experience of what happened in Brazil. We can identify, and we're becoming increasingly sophisticated at identifying accounts or groups rather that appear to be used as forms of mass message transmission. And through up to and through the Brazilian elections, we disabled hundreds of thousands of WhatsApp accounts. By the way, often leading to very sharp complaints from some of the political players involved. But also we're going beyond that. So now, as you know, we've imposed a restriction on how many people you can forward a message to, and crucially, we've now changed the way that a forwarded message appears on WhatsApp, so you can see that it's been forwarded. In other words, it hasn't been generated by the person who sends it to you. And we will continue to innovate in order to make sure that WhatsApp stays close to the mission that we believe in, that it is a private, encrypted, overwhelmingly one-to-one, intimate form of messaging. It is not there to be used for sort of broadcast mass transmission political purposes.
Thanks, Nick. I suspect we'll get more questions on WhatsApp for sure. We have 2 questions back then. So, Rafael.
Hi. My name is Rafael Maffei. I'm a professor at the University of São Paulo as well. I have when you mentioned elections and the problems of uses of social media in elections, you clearly focused on the lie aspect or the fake aspect. My question to you is whether you think that there can be some kind of improper use that suggests manipulation, even though the manipulating party does not rely on content that is properly fake or a lie, but that despite being truthful can somehow trigger fears. So my worry is that if we set the line on the truth or fake content, we miss content that can be manipulatory despite not being fake. So it's sort of weird to say that the truth can be manipulative, but if Carlos is afraid of clowns and I'm afraid of lawnmowers, and he gets tons of messages about real clowns.
Loving all the examples that involve me.
And I get tons of messages about real lawnmowers, and somehow they're associated through real speeches with real politicians. None of it is a lie, but it's still somehow pushing him towards pushing his buttons and pushing my buttons through stuff that can be known through the use of social data that, as you acknowledge, is so central to the business of social media. I'd like to hear you on that. Thank you.
I think we need to be really careful here. I say this as an ex-politician. Politicians say beastly things about each other, make wild, exaggerated claims, selectively use facts, forensically target voters, and have done so for as long as I've ever observed politics. I represented for 12 years in the UK Parliament, a wonderful constituency in the southwest of an old industrial town in the north of England called Sheffield. I knew that constituency so well that I would know that in a particular street, a message about the local bus stop was going to resonate more than a message about school places in a school 2 miles away. And I would tailor my message. Of course I would. Because it was my job to try and speak to people on things that they... And I might make claims about my opponent who thinks it's outrageous that they're saying that. I mean, just to take an example from my country, as predictable as the sun rising in the morning in every election in the United Kingdom, the Conservatives say that the Labour Party is going to crash the economy, and the Labour Party say the Conservatives are going to destroy the NHS. It's just what they do. And by the way, quite a lot of that will be misleading, and a lot of it gets targeted to particular voters. So I think we'd be very, very careful indeed, to distinguish that which is new from social media, which of course is velocity, virality, and the ability to target voters with ever more forensic precision, to distinguish that, where I do think the social media platforms have a responsibility, from candidly the freedom for people to talk rubbish if they want to. It's part of the freedom of a free society. And I really think we've got to be very, very careful not to conflate the two. Just because politicians use social media platforms, we should not suddenly be applying standards we've never applied before to open democratic debate in a free society. So I think that's why we place the heaviest emphasis on transparency, particularly election time. So that we now see that, particularly through paid adverts, political parties and campaigns can target voters with extraordinary precision. And we don't think it's our role to start adjudicating on whether one claim about health spending versus another is right or wrong. It's not our role to start entering into the democratic debate between different political parties making claim and counterclaim. It is our role to make sure that our users are very, very clear who's targeting that, why, who's paid for it, and for what purpose. So that's kind of our philosophy on this. I'm not saying it's perfect, and I'm not saying it can't be improved upon, but it's based on quite a thoughtful approach to not allowing the worry or the horror of the way in which politicians talk about politics these days into thinking that somehow social media platforms should suddenly enter deep into the fabric of democratic debate about what politicians say about each other. We really strongly feel that's not our role. And I think people would be very unsettled if we did take on that role, by the way.
Thanks for that. We have a little bit more than 10 minutes, so let's try to bundle up at least 2 questions. So we have one from Pedro there, and one here in the middle.
Hello, Nick. Thank you for your comments. I'm Pedro from Alana Institute that works with children's rights, including digital rights. And my question is on children and social media. And how can we better regulate and understand, especially for countries like Brazil, where we don't have messenger kids. And because of that and other cultural behavior, we have a lot of children from 9 to 12 especially using Facebook here. How can we really face this issue? And even for countries like United States that we have COPPA, for instance, there are different complaints about Facebook's COPPA compliance. And how can we could better regulate and really face this issue right now?
Pedro, thank you. Can you send your mic just a little bit in front here so that we can at least bundle up 2 questions?
Well, Pedro, the first answer to say is of course it's entirely up to experts like you and decision makers in the government and lawmakers in the Brazilian parliament to take steps if you want to set up new child protection agencies or indeed introduce new laws as you rightly alluded. You alluded to COPPA in the United States. There are other provisions in other countries. My own country, the UK, has tended to be quite sort of leading edge of some of this thinking. And I think it is totally right that companies like Facebook are put under constant pressure to make sure that we take extra care to ensure that the vulnerable and the young are not susceptible to or subject to or exposed to content that we know to be harmful to them. The only other thing I would say is we do need more research. The research is, as you know, I'm sure better than I do, is very ambivalent on this point. I mean, as you may know, there was a major study reported in the Lancet magazine just earlier this week of a major survey over 3 years of children exactly in the age category that you suggest, that came to quite an interesting conclusion, which was that it's not necessarily the amount of social media use that's damaging, that they do think there is a displacement activity going on, particularly and very specifically an impact on sleep for children, and it appears to be particularly an impact on sleep for girls in a particular category. Other studies, there was a major Oxford University survey, I think about 8,000 children in a cohort study stretching all over almost a decade, who came away and said we can find almost no evidence at all of a relationship between social media use and mental health amongst teenagers. And then you have other studies which, assert the reverse. So we are very keen to work with researchers to just understand this issue better, because with understanding and with a more reliable sort of empirical base, we can then design our products in order to do something which everybody wants. Everybody. I mean, as you may know, we have recently significantly changed our policies and our approach on Instagram when it comes to pictures and images of self-harm. Incredibly difficult, sensitive area where in the past we worked very closely with experts, academics, groups like the Samaritans and others, and where we led by their evidence, we allowed certain images of, even graphic images of self-harm, where it was judged that they were important expressions of folk seeking help. And we have a fairly sophisticated arrangement where, particularly if our automated systems identify someone who appears to be at risk of self-harm or even worse, taking their own life, that we get first responders to them. I think over the last year or so, in about 3,000 cases, we were able to help through those routes to get first responders to help, particularly teenagers who are susceptible to self-harm. But anyway, we decided, not least in the wake of some tragic events elsewhere, to sort of change that where we drew that line. Again, we worked with academics and others, and we now don't allow any images of graphic self-harm, even where they may be used as a sort of cry of help. But this is really, really difficult stuff. I mean, it's really very, very sensitive stuff. And the only thing I can sort of say is that we remain very keen to understand the issues better, so that we can then design our products to be as safe as possible.
Thanks. It's probably our final question. Don't want to put any pressure, but please,
okay,
go ahead.
so I'm going to ask 2 questions. My name is Angela Pimenta. I'm a journalist working for an NGO focused on journalism development. My first question is about the Christchurch Call, the document that Facebook, among other platforms, signed. It is an initiative led by the New Zealand Prime Minister and says it's to fight hate speech and extremism. And there is 2 provisions there, that platforms would be working together in terms of more transparency and algorithm review. I would like you, if possible, to update us on that. The second question is about the next year elections, Brazilian local elections. It could involve as many as 500,000 candidates.
Wow.
Brazil has 5,570 municipalities. Would Brazil have an advisory board as this one that Facebook is designing for next year? Because we are expecting a lot of noise.
Okay. So on the first, yes, there is increasingly sophisticated cooperation between the major tech companies, Google, Microsoft, Twitter, Facebook, Amazon. And we have established a forum called the Global Internet Forum for Counterterrorism, in which we are, with ever greater intensity, sharing technological expertise so that when, God forbid, terrorists use any of our platforms to plan or incite or advertise their murderous deeds, we are in a position to either anticipate that more effectively or to react to it. And possibly one of the most important and effective areas of cooperation has been the way in which we have been able to pool our resources into, in effect, a sort of hashing sort of library, so that we can very quickly identify the different versions of content that it has no place on our platforms. And we're getting better. I mean, I should stress, this work has been going on for some time. Facebook now identify and block over 99% of ISIS and Daesh related terrorist content before anyone reports it to us, which is a transformation compared to the situation we were in 2 years ago. But to be very precise, the reason we've been able to do that is we've been able to train our artificial intelligence, our machine learning systems, to identify patterns of behavior. Because the forms of violence we're talking about, or the forms of propaganda we're talking about, are often quite ritualized. So we have quite a lot of material to use, so that these pattern recognition systems, because that's basically what they are, can function. Unfortunately, in the case of Christchurch, a lone gunman operating completely on their own, well, seemed to have warned some of his accomplices beforehand, just walking into a mosque with an automatic machine gun is just not, in many ways, thankfully, material that we have a great deal of. So so we're now working across the industry, and I'm hoping that in the margins of the United Nations General Assembly next month in New York, we will make a significant new announcement on further industry-wide cooperation at an event hosted by Jacinda Ardern, the New Zealand Prime Minister. And on the second point, I think what your question was, would the oversight board that I was talking about, would that operate? Yeah, no, the oversight board is a global thing, so it'll apply to everywhere. So it's not just applied to the United States. But I really don't want to raise expectations that thousands upon thousands of content disputes in the middle of an election campaign are going to be adjudicated upon by the oversight board. I really don't want to raise expectations that the board is going to be in a position to do that. And the way to think about the board is more like a court. Courts move slowly. They don't provide second by second adjudication. We're looking at ways in which we might be able to fast track board decisions on really vital issues of content that need to be looked at quickly. But so the good answer is yes, it'll be applied to Brazil, much as it will apply to any place where our services are available. But I don't want you to think that it's going to be just on standby for day and night, instantaneous political disputes between candidates, having arguments about different electoral content on our platform.